Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Farm Credit Illinois. I want to start off in South America, and we're going to look at the NDVI data again, like we did in our meetings this winter, to show you now that they're in their 7th week of record high NDVI across parts of Brazil's growing areas. So NDVI is a plant health indicator as viewed from space, and compared to the historical records, we are outside of the average by a long ways. All right. Now, this means that the crop in Brazil, especially this first crop of soybeans coming out, is likely going to be very, very large. And their harvest progress is well ahead of average in Mato Grosso, which is their biggest producing state. But the safrinha corn crop is going in a bit late, and the full season corn crop that often goes in, they call it their summer crop, not the safrinha, but the summer crop, is also a little bit late in getting harvested. I don't know if there's a story there, but I want you to be aware of that. What I can tell you is that areas we've been monitoring for the possibility of some problems, like down here in Rio Grande do Sul, Uruguay, or into these provinces of Argentina like Buenos Aires, or going over toward Cordoba, Santa Fe, or Entre Rios, which had been so dry for the last 30 plus days. Well, lately there's been storms rolling through this area, and over the next 2 weeks it is forecast to be wet. So the long story short here is that if we are going to anticipate there being a problem in Brazil, I'm not finding it right now. Now, could there be one down the road with the safrinha crop going in? Sure. But at this stage, we're not going to be looking for Brazil to shake up markets in any way that could be meaningful for us as we finish winter. Speaking of finishing winter, look at how the early January to early February precipitation has looked when you compare it to historical averages. Now, your eye is probably drawn to the big bullseye in the west of very dry conditions, but look here throughout the Midwest. Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and then don't forget Wisconsin, Minnesota. We've had subpar precipitation for the last 30 days. And right now, if you look at where the snow is, we've been watching it melt, from that big event on the 24th and 25th. It just keeps melting farther and farther into the northeast as even more warm air overspreads that area. But I want you to see that right now, the snow cover across much of the Great Plains, the Missouri River Basin, is just lacking. And that's why the river levels, Mississippi River levels in St. Louis, are nearly 3 feet below low stage right now. Because underneath this, just have a look. Our latest soil moisture shows that water that was in that snow was not much, and as it melts, it's not reviving a lot of our soil moisture issues. And for us in the state of Illinois right now, we are currently sitting below 2%. This is a 2 percentile, so think of it as a rank. You're in the bottom 4, all right, in terms of the years over which we've been observing our soil moisture in this state. So just want you to be aware that we have some overwinter drought issues that need corrected. When you think about the temperatures, this is where the story's written. We've been so cold east and we've been so mild west that the jet stream has done this rather than this. And if we can reorient this jet stream pattern, then that'll happen. You get the cold west and the warm east, then everything will turn itself around and we're going to open things up to more precipitation. But due to this, take a look at the Great Lakes. 54% ice coverage, average is 36%. That's a lot of ice on the Great Lakes, which will be very important for those states that are east of the Great Lakes going into spring. They may deal with some lingering cooler weather longer because the lakes have an influence downwind. But the good news in the near term is the polar vortex, which has been sitting over the eastern third of North America for a while. Well, you see the map on the left. That's where it is today. We expect, though, by the time we get it 10 days out from now, it will have fully retreated to Scandinavia and Siberia, and there's a pretty sizable stratospheric warming event taking shape over Canada. And the net effect of that is to reorient this pattern. Now, here's where we get into some interesting stuff. I've drawn for you over the next 15 days. This gets us well into the third week of February here. This ridge that's building into the center part of the United States while a deep trough of low pressure dives into the west. But that is the opposite of where we've been for the last 30 plus days, and that is good news overall. First, in terms of temperatures, we're going to see some very mild days coming up. This is a 15-day sliding window of temperatures. So you're seeing every 5 days sliding through the next 15. Does that make sense? We're just kind of seeing how the pattern's going to change. And with the warm-up that's expected, we do expect to get some moisture into this pattern as well. So here it is. This is your next 10 days according to the European model. And what I want you to observe is the changes happening in the West that are firing off systems like that one coming through on like February 13th, 14th, and 15th. And then the bigger one on the 16th, 17th, and 18th that's coming through the Midwest. The net effect of all of this is it's going to be too mild to give us much snow out of it. Okay, here's your next 10 days of forecasting total snow. But snowpack's building in the west. It's building to our north. And we are expecting to get some moisture out of this. Now, over the next 10 days, okay, this plays out to the 19th. Yes, there is a system that's happening right around Valentine's Day that is expected to move through our area, delivering good moisture. But as you can see, just to our north, it is relatively dry. And that means if there's any shift at all in the track of this system, for example, if it goes farther south, we will see these precipitation totals erode. But the good news is this is different. It is different from where we've been for the last 35 to 40 days. And now we're starting to see our greatest risk of being drier, moving back into this part of the plains with much wetter conditions on our doorstep. That's what these two maps are trying to convey. Now, what about beyond that? Let's go from mid-February to mid-March. Most models are trying to really crank up the Ohio Valley, Mississippi Valley storm system track. The GFS is doing it, so is the European model. And if we think about this in terms of temperatures, well, watch the warmth come over the next couple of weeks. There it is. But we do have to be aware that at the end of the month, into the beginning of March, we could start to see a return of some more Arctic air coming down in that familiar corridor where it was in January. I do think that a lot of the plains, though, stays mild during this time frame. Just something to think about, because it is currently the plains that I'm most worried about for preserving their drought going into this upcoming spring and summer. Now, what's going to be informing a lot of my spring and summer outlooks is going to be this map. What you have right here is the decaying, the death of, the end of a La Nina and the building in of an El Nino. We've watched the ocean temperatures get more mild. They've faded back toward neutral here, and they've warmed up there. And nearly all of our models right now are predicting, at best, a weak to moderate El Nino by summer. Some of the models are projecting up to a strong El Nino by the time we finish summer. It'll likely peak next winter, but this is a huge change. 5 out of the last 6 years, we have had La Nina conditions, and even the El Nino of 2023 didn't quite look like this as it progressed through the late winter into early spring timeframe. So you say, well, what years does it look like? And I'm going to go back to the years I shared with you at our meetings. 2018, 2014, and 2009, I think, are good analog years to watch for February and March. Now, what does that mean? We tend to have an active delta into the Ohio and Missouri, Mississippi river valleys here. We tend to be drier in the plains and drier in the southeast. We tend to have access to cold air. So you look at it and go, man, that's blue. It's going to be so brutally cold. No. This is just 3 degrees colder than average, and what it's suggesting is we have access to cold air at times through the rest of February and into March. Yes, the near term is warming up, but after that, just be prepared for it to come back and be cold before we fully break off into spring. Now, what about spring? Well, I'm going to include some more years here. I've got 18, 14, and 09, but I'm going to include every other year since 1960 where we had a La Nina winter and then an El Nino by summer. And on the left, you see the precipitation. Now, for Illinois, these were not bad years. We tended to be very close to average on our spring precipitation. In fact, on slightly drier than average side of things, this is good. This is more open windows if listen carefully, if the analogs stacked together are a good call. We tend to be drier in the western Corn Belt. We did not tend to go over into a hot spring. Okay, we tended to see more cooler conditions in March before we broke away into very warm conditions by May. So March is kind of tamping out May. Do you see what I'm talking about here? Well, what do the models say? Well, the brand new updates, these just came out from the European model, show wetter Ohio Valley. So instead of keeping the dryness here, encroaching in on western Illinois, they're much more broad in the wet conditions going into spring. The new NMME, which was actually just released today, has this whole region near normal to weather normal with dryness kind of way out here in the western plains. So that's a look at what we think spring might be in terms of precipitation. What about summer? Well, when we look back at all of those years, June to August, on the precipitation side of things, when you stack them all up, all right, Illinois doesn't deviate too far from its average. But as I look at the years, we've got like 2009 in there and 14 and 18, which we've talked about. But we also have 02 and 91, which were hotter and drier summers. But overall, when you stack them together and say, what about June to August for temperatures? These were not overly hot summers, which means right now, if you pin me down and say, what does this all stack up to mean? It seems that we have a corridor in through here that has the risk of being drier and the risk of being hotter. And I'm going to tell you, if you're in Illinois, you want Texas to be hot and dry every summer. Now, we don't want that for our brothers in Texas and brothers and sisters in Texas, but we understand that the hotter and drier they get, the more the storms run the ridge by the time we fully get into July and August and September. So look, that was a lot fast, but these are the things we're keeping an eye on right now. And I just want to be clear that there's uncertainty, but the way things are shaping up, I think I found some good analog years, and the models look something like this. Look at the June, July, August precipitation in the Euro. Boy, it's stormy in this area. And even the NMME is not drier, but I'm telling you, watch Texas as we go forward, okay? That could be a clear indicator as to the way summer might shape up. All right, that's what I've got for you. I hope you all have a good and safe finish to February. I'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks.